Last episode, we covered a military handgun icon straight from Paul Mauser and his talented employees, the Federals. Let's stay with Mauser just a bit longer and see the excellent, if somewhat unexpected results of his faith being placed in a different man, who envisioned not just a single handgun, but an entire pistol family. Hi, I'm Othais, and this is the Mauser 1914 pocket pistol. Let's get it in the light box. Handy in size, the Model 1914 is only 6.1 inches long. It weighs in at 1.3 pounds unloaded, has a magazine capacity of 8 32 ACP cartridges single stacked. Alright, like so many other things, we're going to need some context history, so I'll set this down for a moment. Remember from the C96 that Mauser never got his military contract he wanted with that previous pistol. Instead, it went to the Luger. Well, that left him smarting, and so he kind of went back to the drawing board and brought in a great, promising engineer by the name of Josef Nickl out of Austria. Now, he joined the company in 1904, but around 1908, 1909, he's put in charge of a new project. In this, he envisions having a family of pistols, a group of pistols sharing a similar design and features, but in different sizes, shapes, and calibers. This is brilliant. I mean, this is something that we're very familiar with today. We kind of expect models to share similar features. I mean, we almost consider it like an icon of a brand to have all your pistols look, similar. But at the time, this is revolutionary. So, they want to do something from about 25 ACP, which is popular defensive cartridge at the time, all the way up to 9mm and 45 caliber military cartridges. Now, to do this, they decided that the wise thing to do would be to start with what they would consider the biggest European cartridge, the 9mm Parabellum. We've covered this military service cartridge before, but to quickly review, its powerful load made it unsuitable for unlocked breech pistols. Unfortunately, the team at Mauser didn't quite realize unlocked breech wasn't an option. They started with a blowback design, and we see prototypes in 1909 appearing that are just, they look a lot like what will become the 1914, but just a lot bigger. They don't work out so well. As a matter of fact, they went ahead and included sort of a buffer spring in the slide. That's actually a holdover from a previous trials model, but the buffer spring wasn't enough. I mean, there's just no real way to make a blowback 9mm small and handy and yet still controllable. We obviously have seen blowback 9mm even today, but they're quite large just to make up for that mass needed. The other way to take care of it would be to have a heavier spring, but again, you run into this problem like we'll see in another sort of Dreiss prototype, is that the spring pressure is just so high that it's almost impossible to operate the slide. So the 1909 failed. But they already had all this research in place. They already had all this machine tooling in place, and they had the patents out, and everything was ready to go. And again, they're working on a pistol family. So they sort of made the financially responsible decision and said, you know what? While we're trying to figure out what the heck to do about 9mm and maybe 45, let's go ahead and get something to market. So they started with something that was very, very popular in that time, which was the 25 ACP cartridge. This little defensive cartridge was introduced by John Browning with his Model 1905 vest pistol. Today, we find it to be far too weak as a defensive cartridge, but at the time, people really wanted some, little vest pistol handgun that they could slip into a pocket and keep with them. The alternatives that were popular at the time would have been something like 22LR, which was rimfire. At least this is a centerfire cartridge. Unfortunately, it doesn't really produce quite as much power as even 22LR. Now, the 25 ACP was a lot easier to work with. All they had to do was take that gigantic 1909 9mm and shrink it on down, make a few refinements, and boom, they have what they called at the time the model of 1909 and 25 ACP. This system still had a few unnecessary features, especially the buffer spring, so with further refinement right before market, it became the Model 1910. And they're handy little things. I mean, it's not a large handgun. And they sold really, really well. They were extremely popular. These little 1910s are really recognizable because of the side latch that's used to take down the side plate. So we can get a closer look at that on the photo. Anyway, that would actually go away when they released the 1914, and the pistol would again be upgraded in 1934. So there's 3 sort of sub-variations of this gun. Most of the time when you see them out there, people are listing them as the 1910, but it's really like the 1014 or the 1034. There's little differences. Makes it fun to collect. They did not abandon the idea of 9mm though. Throughout this entire process, all the way into World War I, they're going to keep trying. And so we're going to see a series of pistols known kind of collectively as the Model 1912 and the 1912-14. All these use various systems of retarded blowback, just a method of some sort of spring-powered, in early cases, a lever, and in later cases, a flap. And these, all they did was slow down the rearward action of the slide. With that slide slowed down, they hoped that they would be able to get, most of the pressure of the round out the muzzle before the slide opened. Unfortunately, these made the system very hard and stiff to operate, required special levers to operate, and had all sorts of other problems. We're not really set up for trials guns and experimental weapons. We're mostly doing service guns. So, a good place to go for this would actually be our friend Ian over at Forgotten Weapons. He has a nice video up of the 12, 14, and I believe 45 ACP. I'll go ahead and throw a link down in the comments. Now, this gun is sort of sitting in that defensive cartridge realm of 25 ACP. We had the military attempts for 9mm. In between, though, is the popular 32 ACP cartridge. This cartridge was introduced on Browning's Model 1900 and would serve through World War II and somewhat beyond as a popular mild police and occasionally military cartridge. Today we consider it too weak to be a reliable man-stopper, but that didn't prevent it from serving worldwide. When we're trying to go from 25 ACP up to 32, you'd think that we would just sort of increase the dimensions of everything and it would work out. And it kind of looks like they did. But, not wanting to waste, over at Mauser, Federal, and Nickl, they decided to go ahead and work on some improvements. They took ideas from the 9mm trials and just some general refinements when they went ahead and made the 1914 and 32 ACP. So if we take a look at these together, we're going to see that there's some extra milling. These serrations that used to be flush are now sort of bulbous. They poke out so you have better grip. When we look on the underside, we'll see that our barrel takedown now has a push button, a spring-loaded, so that she kind of locks in place better. On the other side, we're going to see that the side plate is now simply dovetailed. It does not have this turned-down latch. It's a lot easier to get out, too. While we've got this over here, I want to go ahead and point out on this gun, it was also on the 1910, but just while I'm here in the camera, this has a great safety system. It's 2 separate and distinct motions. Thumb down to put it on safe, press button to put it on fire. And that's remarkable because at the time, especially when you look at the rest of the series, safeties and ergonomics don't always go together. And it shows a real focus of thought on the fact that you want to have 2 definite and distinct motions for on and off to really avoid confusion. You want to know unconsciously what it is that you're doing. And by the way, it favors safety off. It's a nice, quick, easy, natural motion. It's honestly a great system. We really like it. For those curious, it actually comes from a sort of trials gun. Both the C06 and the Mauser 0608 had these sorts of features. Alright, while we have the gun, a lot of people have been asking for takedowns, so we'll go ahead and show that. On this one, all you really need to do is depress the button on the underside and twist that barrel pin, pull her free. There we go. Now, with our magazine in, we can lock the action back. At first, this locks on the follower, but as we drop our mag in a moment, there's actually a teetering mechanism in there that's going to hold the slide open. You'll see that better in our animation. But let's go ahead and get the barrel out of the way. She just lifts right out. Now, to get that slide forward some, we're going to release the mag, which will, stiff, there we go, which will now take the slide from resting on the follower to resting on that teeter like we said. We now need to get it to taut the other way. So I'm going to reinsert the mag. I know, kind of odd. But now she's sliding forward. She's going to catch on the mag, so we need to get it back out of the way for one final time. The slide can come off the front. This is where you want to be a little careful because your recoil spring's going to fall out. But the bigger issue is that our striker is still under spring pressure. You want to contain that while you lift her away. And there you have it, she's out. Just for those curious, that side plate, she just dovetails up. You kind of want to rock the rear up and then pull the front away. Very likely your disconnector is going to just fall right out because it just sits on a simple pin in there. You can see, by the way, while we've got this apart, this is a terrifically complicated pistol for 32 ACP. When you look at animation of this versus anything else we've done so far or about to do, there's a lot going on in here, and it's a robust but complicated system. Honestly, though, for what it's worth, it adds a lot of value to actually shooting the gun. These are well thought features, and Mae will give her opinion on them a little bit later. All right, we're being a little bit unfair because when we look at the slide of this handgun, it's actually a later version. The original 1914 as released had what was known as a humpback, which is that they sort of milled down where the ejection port was. I believe they were trying to make it more compact or more stylish. I can't honestly tell you the reason for sure. But very quickly after that, they decided that it's much more economical to just go ahead and mill straight across the top and keep this a nice cylindrical shape. So 99.9% of the ones you're going to see are going to look like this. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing over for an animation so you guys can see really how it works. In the meantime, I'll put this back together. A pull of the trigger raises the combination trigger bar's front and lowers its rear, which serves as the sear. This frees the striker to spring forward, discharging the gun. A simple blowback, the slide is driven rearward, extracting the spent casing. The recoil spring under the barrel returns it forward, picking up a fresh round. The safety simply cradles the trigger bar, preventing it from dropping and freeing the striker. Note the simple disconnector, which forces the trigger catch to retract when out of battery. This prevents it from engaging the trigger bar. Otherwise fairly basic, we'll let this empty out. Take a look at that magazine. As we drop it, watch how the combination ejector and slide stop pops up at the rear. When we reinsert the magazine, that combo part is tilted back, freeing the slide to spring forward. Alright, let's go ahead and load this thing up and let Mae get some shots downrange.
Alright, let's load up a magazine using that auto slide drop. Aim and squeeze. Lever down to activate the safety. Push button to ready for fire. She'll lock open on empty. And let's see the damage. Alright, y'all have had your fun with me, now let's go back to Othais.
So these guns, despite never really evolving into a 9mm, not a commercial success anyway, they still, independently, the 25s and 32s, were a huge financial boon to Mauser. They sold very well. Between the two of them, probably roughly about 1 million produced. And despite, 25 is conquering that pocket pistol market, and at the same time, this 32 is a really popular police pistol. It's right up there with like the top 3 in that period. Now, it did ultimately become a military pistol, even though it never made it to that 9mm chambering. And the reason is because of World War I. We see this all the time. With Germany going into the war, they wanted everything they could lay their hands on, and so a myriad of 32 ACP pistols were picked up. And believe me, we're going to cover all of them in this series as we go through, because despite the fact that, yes, it's another 32 ACP pocket pistol, each one has unique features as you're beginning to see. Anyway, these guys were whipped into the German war machine and sold internally for 39 marks. Proved pretty popular, and post-war they actually went on to serve further. As being one of the more popular police designs, a lot of them were retained by the government after the armistice, and so despite Versailles, you see plenty of these in inventory. As a matter of fact, the one I'm holding here, and I'll whip up the picture, has a 1920 inventory mark. Now, it's a testament to this gun's design that, basically most of it was done by 1909, and yet, as late as 1934, it's going to see another facelift. Not an overhaul, just a facelift. You see, in 1930, Luger production was moved over to Mauser, and along with it came a man by the name of August Weiss. Now, Weiss he was put in charge of all handgun development and decided that it was time to sort of update the little 1914, make it seem more modern, and compete with the current pocket pistol generation where you're seeing changes from Walther and things like that. So a big part of that is sort of grip contour and ergonomics. What they did is they reworked the grips on this to be more swept back, and they went ahead and updated some internal parts to take advantage of the machine process of metal stampings, just to sort of make it cheaper and easier to produce. So this would be known as the 1434 in this design, and then they also upgraded a version of the 1910 over to the 34 pattern as well. I probably got some line drawings for these. There you go. And they would continue production through about 1941 is where it drops off, but there's still some rolling out as late 1944, early 1945, when they finally seem to halt production. Now, the Model 34 is sort of famous for serving with the Kriegsmarine, and if we get our hands on one, we'll do a little bit more about that later. Alright, well, that sort of covers the history of this gun, so let's go ahead and turn it over to Mae and get some opinion on just what it's like to shoot one. Alright, we made room for Mae once more. She's chock full of opinions. Oh, so many opinions. Some of them are about the Mauser 1914, so let's go ahead and just get those. Here you go.
Thank you. Well, from the very get-go when I picked up this weapon, I noticed instantly it's got a lot of weight up at the top of the slide, which personally I think helps with the recoil for this one. But in terms of the ergonomics of this weapon, it was very comfortable. The swooped-in back grip actually fits to my hand very nicely. All my fingers fit on here, which for me personally, I can understand how that would be. I have smaller hands, but for someone like Othais, his pinky's hanging off, not quite as comfortable. But it actually, with the placement of the weapon, you can see it made operating the safety one-handed really simple and easy. Overall, this was the most comfortable pocket pistol we've handled for 32 ACP so far.
Alright, that's a good impression, but we need to talk about actually shooting it. Once you pulled that trigger, what's going on with this pistol?
Out of all the 32 pocket pistols we've shot so far, this one had the cleanest trigger we've had. I couldn't even tell when the break was happening. It was absolutely so glassy. And then when operating the slide, these protruding extensions right here made it simple to grip. The sights on here were tall, making it really easy to read. It honestly was like most modern 9mm pistols for me. That's all I can think of to add on for the action for that, but this was very smooth. The recoil on it wasn't heavy at all. I think that was because of the heavy slide, honestly. The recoil wasn't bad for this at all. Plus, it's a 32. But overall, the action on this one, I thought was a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, a lot of that really is going to come from how over-engineered this pistol is. I mean, there are a lot of little extras that you do not see in other 32 handguns. And again, that kind of comes from the fact that this is supposed to be a family of pistols. So you're including all sorts of parts that you expect to include on a bigger full service size handgun, because why not? You want everything to be uniform. In the end, we don't get the full service handgun, so instead we have 25 ACPs and 32 ACPs with ridiculously complicated interiors, but hey, the benefit's there. I mean, all these parts interact really well. It's all really smooth. I mean, I agree with her. I shot it too. It is an extremely good trigger for what this pistol is supposed to be. All right, so one other thing that's kind of unique to this gun is the lock open, which is, for those who aren't aware, it's going to lock open like we showed in the animation, and it's going to stay open until we reinsert the magazine. What did you think about that kind of feature and just sort of the magazine in general?
Starting off with the magazine on this, I've said it before in all previous videos, I'm not a fan of the heel releases. They're not my favorite. But for the lock open on this one in particular, it actually isn't quite that useful in my opinion, just because, yes, it's going to tell me when I'm out of rounds in case I've lost count, but if this magazine is out and it's already locked open, there is no way that you're going to be able to put it back in place unless you pop the magazine back in. Honestly, for things like disassembly, I just don't find that a very useful feature.
Yeah, a lot of us are going to be concerned with something like this, if I may, because again, we're used to a lock open, right? We've seen this 100 times. Normally, on some pistols like a Beretta, you'll pull this out and the slide will just come forward. On other pistols, there'll be a slide release that you just snap and she comes forward. There's none of that here. I can crank on this and it's not going to reset. It has to be fed. It has to have a magazine placed in to set it forward. The problem with that is, unless you're carrying a spare mag, which, by the way, if you have a spare mag and you're doing a hot load, that's great. If you're just cleaning it, disassembling it, whatever, inspecting it in some form or another, and you don't necessarily want to chamber around, what are you going to do? You're going to feed around every time you try to put that mag in there. That's a little bit of a pain. All right, so I guess final question, tacky question. You are handed this thing and told, welcome to World War I. Do you feel confident about it?
You know, in terms of confidence, I actually do. Everything about this gun functioned right. We didn't have any failure to feed or failure to eject problems. The trigger was clean, the weight was there, the ergonomics of this gun were fantastic. I liked almost everything about this gun. I would feel confident taking it into battle. The only problem I could conceive is the 32. It's not that powerful of a round, so that could be a problem, but I'd still take it in. I still would have accurate shots with this weapon.
Okay, so if we're thinking of classes here, 32s versus full-service handguns, in the 32 category, is this your favorite so far?
Yes, out of everything we've shot so far, this 32 is the king of the 32s.
All right, and by the way, I should say we are ahead on filming for certain 32s. So just because you haven't seen it in an episode yet doesn't mean she hasn't shot it. She's actually sampled most of the 32s that were available to Germany during the war. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty well-rounded opinion. We'll let you know in a future episode if it changes. All right, anything else? Final thoughts?
No, I think we covered everything with this gun.
Good. Well, again, notifications are going to be after the credits, and we're really glad that you guys tune in and watch this show. We're getting a lot of love. We appreciate it every day.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Today's update is audio only as I'm fighting a cold, so I'm going to stay in my jammies. I can't imagine how I got a cold lately. Just a reminder, we do, in fact, have some World War I t-shirts at the ready. I'm hearing good things from people so far. Also, I ran into a lot of you playing Verdun the past week, so don't forget we have a Mumble server for everyone to use. Details are on the site. I'll leave a link here in the comments. Patreon is currently at $739. There's some slow and steady growth there. Thank you, everyone. It means a lot. Finally, I'm going to go ahead and be candid and say in the past 2 episodes, our viewership, it's not that it's gotten less, it just hasn't grown quite as much. I think we're reaching a kind of a plateau until we can get the word out some other way. So if you know of a community, blog, etc. that would like to hear about this show, I don't mean spam, I mean really like to hear about us, please just let us know. We're always looking to grow the audience. All right, thanks everyone. We appreciate you watching and supporting us.